10 years of blood for a single woman. I built the snare that forged heroes into monsters and reduced a civilization to ash. As innocents burn, the gods mock our rage. I am Odysseus, the architect of this hell, and this victory is my eternal damnation.
Forget marble statues. The ancient world was a grim spectacle, run by divine hunters who demanded human sacrifice and destroyed lives on a whim. We're peeling back the layers of their madness. This is Shroud of Lore.
Helen walked to the ships over the bodies of those who had died for her beauty for 10 years, and not a single fold of her dress was stained with the hero's blood. Odysseus watched her pass. She moved like a goddess through the ruins of Troy, serene, untouched, as if the carnage around her were merely an unpleasant dream from which she would soon awaken. Menelaus walked beside her, his sword still wet, his eyes fixed on his reclaimed wife with an expression that mixed love and hatred in equal measure. This was victory. This was what 10 years of war had purchased. Odysseus turned away and vomited into the ashes. But that moment of reckoning had not yet come. First, there was the choice. 3 days earlier, Odysseus had stood before the Greek kings with a proposal that would either end the war or damn his soul forever. "We cannot breach the walls," he said. "We have tried for 10 years. Achilles is dead. Ajax is dead. Half our army lies buried on this beach. If we continue as we have, we will all die here, and Troy will still stand. Then what do you suggest?" Agamemnon's voice was weary. The King of Kings had aged 2 decades in this war. His golden hair had turned to gray. His eyes held the hollow look of a man who had sacrificed his daughter for a victory that refused to come. Deception. Odysseus spread his hands. "We build a wooden horse, massive, beautiful, an offering to the gods. We hide our best warriors inside. Then we sail away, making the Trojans believe we have abandoned the siege. And when they take the horse inside their walls, we wait for nightfall. Then we emerge, open the gates, and let the army pour in." Odysseus met each king's eyes in turn. Troy falls not by strength, but by cunning. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken objections. This was not how heroes fought. This was not the glory they had crossed the sea to win. But they were no longer heroes. They were survivors, desperate and broken, willing to try anything that might end their suffering. "Build it," Agamemnon said at last. "Build your horse." The construction took 5 days. Odysseus supervised every detail, the hollow belly, the hidden door, the mechanisms that would allow them to descend silently in the darkness. He selected the warriors who would hide inside, Neoptolemus, fierce son of Achilles, Menelaus, who would finally reclaim his wife, Diomedes, who had wounded gods and feared nothing. And himself. Odysseus would be there when his plan succeeded or failed. On the final night before they sealed themselves inside, Odysseus walked alone on the beach. The waves lapped at his feet, whispering secrets in a language he could almost understand. Having second thoughts, he turned. Athena stood behind him, gray-eyed, armored, beautiful in the cold way of divine things. "You know what will happen when those gates open," Odysseus said. "After 10 years of frustration, our men will not show mercy. They will burn everything. They will spare no one. That is the nature of war. This is different. This is massacre by design. I am building a trap that will turn soldiers into butchers." Athena's smile was thin. "You are building victory. The cost is irrelevant." "Is it?" Odysseus looked at the wooden horse looming in the darkness, its hollow eyes staring toward Troy. "I have spent my life believing that cunning was a gift, a way to achieve what strength could not. Now I wonder if it is a curse." "It is both." Athena placed a cold hand on his shoulder. "That is what makes it divine." She vanished, leaving him alone with his creation and his doubt. The next morning, they climbed inside. The door sealed behind them. And Odysseus, architect of Troy's doom, began his final descent into darkness. The belly of the horse was a tomb for the living. 40 warriors crouched in the wooden darkness, barely able to breathe, forbidden to speak. The heat was suffocating. The smell of sweat and fear filled every breath. Hours passed, endless, crawling hours during which Odysseus could do nothing but wait and listen. He heard the Trojans approach. Heard their voices, cautious at first, then excited. They had found the Greek camp abandoned, the ships sailing away over the horizon. Only this magnificent offering remained, a tribute to the gods, a sign that the invaders had finally accepted defeat. "Bring it inside." The voice was distant but clear. "This is a gift from the Greeks. The war is over." Then another voice, higher, more desperate. "Cassandra, the prophetess no one believed. Don't touch it. There is death inside. I can see them, warriors waiting in the darkness. They will destroy us all." Odysseus's heart stopped. He heard the shuffle of warriors around him, hands moving toward swords. If the Trojans believed Cassandra, if they opened the horse now, silence the mad girl, someone commanded. She has been raving since birth. The horse is sacred, would you insult the gods by rejecting their blessing? Cassandra's screams faded as they dragged her away. The horse began to move, rolling on its hidden wheels, passing through the gates that had held firm for 10 years. Odysseus should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt only the weight of what was coming. Night fell. The sounds of celebration filtered through the wooden walls, singing, laughter, the clinking of cups raised in toast after toast. Troy was celebrating its survival. Troy was celebrating its victory over the invaders who had tormented it for a decade. Troy had no idea that its doom was already inside its walls. "Now," Odysseus whispered. The door opened. One by one, the Greeks descended into the sleeping city. The streets were empty, the defenders drunk or unconscious, the gates unguarded. Odysseus gave the signal. Fire arrows arced over the walls, summoning the army that waited in the darkness. The gates swung open. And the beast awoke. 10 years of frustration, grief, and hatred poured through those gates like a flood. Men who had watched their brothers die on this beach, who had buried friends in foreign soil, who had dreamed every night of this moment, they showed no mercy. Odysseus saw a Trojan soldier stumble from a doorway, still half asleep, and fall before he could draw his sword. He saw Greeks kicking down doors, dragging men into the streets, cutting them down before wives and children. He saw temples burning, sacred statues toppled, priests struck down at their own altars. The screams came from everywhere, men dying, women wailing, children crying for parents who would never come. The streets ran with a dark tide that gleamed in the firelight. Neoptolemus was the worst. Achilles' son moved through the city like his father's ghost, unstoppable, merciless, avenging a decade of Trojan victories with every stroke of his blade. He did not distinguish between soldiers and servants. He did not pause for surrender. He painted the streets red with the fury of an orphan who had never known his father. Odysseus should have stopped it. He had the authority. He had the cunning to redirect the violence, to impose some order on the chaos. He did nothing. This was his creation. This was what his cleverness had built. To interfere now would be to admit that the cost was too high, and if the cost was too high, then everything he had done, everything he had sacrificed, had been for nothing. So he stood in the burning streets and watched Troy die, the stench of smoke and copper filling his lungs, and told himself it was necessary. Odysseus found them in the throne room of Priam's palace. The great hall was a slaughterhouse. Bodies of the royal guard lay where they had fallen, their weapons still in their hands, their faces frozen in expressions of disbelief. Tapestries that had hung for generations burned on the walls, filling the room with choking smoke. The old king knelt at the altar of Zeus, his white robes dark with the blood of his sons, his hands raised in prayer to gods who were not listening. Hecuba crouched beside him, shielding a grandchild with her own body, her face a mask of animal terror. Neoptolemus stood over them, Achilles' sword raised for the killing blow. "Wait." Odysseus' voice cut through the chaos. "Neoptolemus, stop." The young warrior turned, and Odysseus saw something in his eyes that made his blood run cold. This was not the boy who had arrived at Troy seeking his father's glory. This was something the war had created, something Odysseus had helped create, by bringing him here, by teaching him that victory justified any means. "Why should I stop?" Neoptolemus's voice was flat, empty. "He is the enemy. His sons took my father's life. His city has been drinking Greek blood for 10 years. He is a suppliant at the altar. The gods, the gods." Neoptolemus laughed, a terrible sound, devoid of joy. "Look around you, Odysseus. Look at what we have done tonight. Where are the gods? They sit on Olympus, watching us butcher each other like animals in a pit. They are entertained." He gestured at the window, where the city burned in 100 places, where the screams of the dying mixed with the roar of flames. This is what they wanted. This is the show they paid for with 10 years of our suffering. And you want me to stop now? To show mercy? Neoptolemus, my father showed Hector mercy. He gave the body back to Priam, and then he died. Mercy is a luxury for men who plan to survive. The young warrior turned back to the king. "I do not plan to survive. I plan to be remembered." The sword fell. Priam crumpled at the foot of the altar, his prayer forever unanswered, his blood mingling with the offerings he had placed before the god. Hecuba's scream echoed through the burning palace, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. Odysseus stood frozen. Around him, the sack continued. He heard crashes as Greeks overturned the treasury, filling their arms with gold that would never buy back their lost years. He heard the wails of Trojan women being dragged toward the ships. He heard the crackling of fires consuming libraries, temples, memories, a civilization's worth of beauty turning to ash. This was the moment he understood. Troy had not fallen because of his clever trap. Troy had fallen because the gods had driven everyone, Greeks and Trojans alike, to the edge of madness. The wooden horse was just a tool. The real weapon was the accumulated rage of 10 wasted years, waiting for any excuse to explode. He had given them that excuse. He had opened the door and released the beast. And now he stood in the ashes of a civilization, watching boys become butchers and kings become corpses, and realized that he had not won a war. He had ended the world. The rest of the night passed in fragments. Fire. Screaming. The crash of temples falling. Cassandra dragged from the sanctuary of Athena, her prophecies finally proven true. Little Astyanax, Hector's son, carried toward the walls while his mother Andromache shrieked and clawed at the soldiers who held her. Odysseus moved through it like a ghost, unable to participate, unable to stop it, unable to do anything but witness the full horror of his success. When dawn finally came, Troy was gone. Nothing remained but smoking ruins and the silence of the dead. Helen walked to the ships, beautiful and untouched. And Odysseus understood at last the true price of his cunning. The fleet gathered at sunset, heavy with plunder and slaves. Odysseus stood at the stern of his vessel, watching Troy burn. The flames still clawed at the sky, smoke rising like the souls of the dead seeking escape. The stench of ash carried across the water, the smell of libraries, temples, generations of memory turning to nothing. He had done this. Every flame, every fallen wall, every body cooling in the streets. Behind him, the ships groaned with stolen gold. Men who had arrived as heroes would return home as kings, their holds stuffed with treasures stripped from burning houses, their decks crowded with women who had been queens that morning. Helen stood at Menelaus's side on a nearby vessel, her beauty unmarked by the destruction around her. She looked bored. 10 years. 100,000 dead. A civilization erased. For her. We should sail, his lieutenant said. The men are eager for home. Home. The word tasted like ash. Odysseus looked at his hands, the hands that had built the horse, that had sealed 40 men inside, that had given the signal to open the gates. These hands had not wielded a sword tonight. They had not needed to. They had done something worse. Across the water, he watched Ajax the Lesser dragging Cassandra toward his ship. The prophetess who had tried to warn them, now a prize for the man who had torn her from Athena's altar. The goddess would remember that. The goddess would remember all of it. Odysseus felt it then, a cold wind that had nothing to do with the sea. Poseidon's anger stirring beneath the waves. Athena's favor curdling into something darker. The gods had enjoyed their show, but the show was over now, and someone would have to pay for the entertainment. He knew who that someone would be. Set sail, he said. The oars bit into the wine-dark sea. Troy disappeared behind them, swallowed by smoke and distance. Odysseus did not look back. He did not need to. He would carry Troy with him forever, in his dreams, in his memories, in the price he was about to pay. The sea stretched before him like a sentence, and somewhere in its depths, the gods were already preparing his punishment. 10 years to destroy a city. 10 more to find his way home. He had built the horse. He had opened the gates. He had won. And for that victory, he would lose everything that remained. The smoke faded on the horizon. The stars emerged, cold and indifferent. And Odysseus, architect of ashes, sailed into a darkness that would swallow a decade of his life. Behind him, the last embers of Troy died. Ahead, the ocean waited, patient, hungry, eternal. His punishment had already begun.